is a combat veteran, a pilot from Iraq and Afghanistan. He's now a member of the United States Congress. He represents Oklahoma. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. He's still protecting our nation, which he believes is Congress's first and foremost job, to protect our nation. Most recently, he launched a bold campaign to repeal the 16th Amendment. That would end all personal and corporate income taxes. Tonight he's going to tell us about that campaign, but he's also going to tell us why we need to stop treating our foes, our enemies, why we have to stop treating our foes and enemies better than our friends. From Oklahoma, Jim Bridenstine. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. Come on up.
Well, it is, can I hold this? Does that work?
Yeah, better.
It is an honor to be here. I got to tell you, Mallory Factor's influence in Washington, D.C. is very well known. And a lot of my friends, you know, I'm a freshman in Congress, so there's a lot that I have to learn. And I was not familiar with Mallory Factor until I told some friends, hey, maybe I'll do this. And they said, well, you've got to do it. This guy, he's a best-selling author. He's a Fox News contributor, banker, businessman, you name it. And he's very influential in Republican politics. And I said, okay, well, I'll go do that. What they didn't tell me is that if I went a little bit too long, I was going to get electrocuted. What they didn't tell me is that if I said something wrong, Pat Caddell was going to yell at me. Or that Mallory Factor himself would call me a blood-sucking insect. This is one of the most intense audiences I've ever spoken to. And if given the opportunity again, I'd be here again, so thank you for inviting me. It's rare that you see a group like this that has as their logo a clock. That's really unprecedented. I'm going to do my best to make sure this thing doesn't buzz me, but I want to challenge Pat Caddell on something. And that is and that is advancing a false narrative that it was 80 Republicans that shut down the government. This is a narrative that was created by President Obama, quite frankly, and I'm going to tell you how it really is in my experience as a freshman Republican. And that is this. Back in July, we were passing appropriation bills. This president has, and I'm sorry, you had these talking points and you wanted me to talk about these things, but this is a little bit different. Back in July, we're supposed to fund our government with appropriation bills. It's how we have representation in Washington, D.C. from our elected officials. So we've got 13 appropriation bills. We pass them one at a time. And in each appropriation bill, you debate amendments, you debate the bill, you modify it, you perfect it, and then you pass it. And this has been going on in our country for hundreds of years. And you've got defense appropriations, homeland security appropriations, energy and water development appropriations, and military construction, veteran affairs. All these appropriation bills we passed back in July in broad bipartisan support in the House of Representatives. And that's how our government is supposed to be funded. This president has America convinced that you either fund everything or we're going to fund nothing. And that is not how our government is supposed to run, but it is how you lose your representation in Washington, D.C. And that's where we are right now in America. And what's funny is this has been going on now for 4 years. It used to be a CR was a temporary stopgap measure for one appropriation bill to get to the appropriation bill. Now a CR is all 13 appropriation bills for all year long, and we're funding next year at last year's levels. And by the way, the world has changed in the last 4 years. I'm a Navy pilot. You introduced me. Thank you for saying that. And I worked very hard in the defense appropriation bill to make some big differences for our national security interests. Now, this president has been neglectful, and this goes to what you were asking me to talk about, how we're nicer to our friends than we are to our enemies. This president has met 36 times with Vladimir Putin and picked, for 2 years, he didn't even have an ambassador to Azerbaijan, which is a little country just south of Russia, just north of Iran. It's a predominantly Muslim country, but it's very moderate and secular. It's a democracy. They accept Jews and they accept Christians, and they let you proselytize there. They believe in what we call the First Amendment. They believe in freedom of speech there. So I worked really hard to plus up an Oklahoma National Guard state partnership program with this little strategically important country, which, by the way, is extracting energy, oil, from the Caspian Sea, sending it across the South Caucasus rather than through Russia, sending it across the South Caucasus and north to Eastern Europe. Why? To provide energy independence and security for the former Soviet satellite states of Russia. And these are the same states that Russia has, by the way, threatened nuclear war against because they had a missile defense shield that the president at one point said, just wait till after my next election and I can bring down that nuclear defense shield. I'll have more flexibility, he said. So look, as a member of Congress, I'm trying to make sure that the South Caucasus states, that the Eastern European states, that these countries understand that our president, who is aggressively pursuing relations with Vladimir Putin, while not meeting with any of the presidents of the Baltic states or Ukraine or the Caucasus states, I'm trying to make sure that they understand that this is a temporary hiccup in our national security posture given this president, and that there are members of Congress and people in our country who want Eastern Europe and the South Caucasus to remain free and independent of this union that Vladimir Putin is trying to reconstitute, and he calls it something other than the Soviet Union. He'll call it the Customs Union. He'll call it the Eurasian Union. But this is a big deal in our country, and we need members of Congress to stand up where the president won't. And so that's one of the items I've been working on. But going back to what Pat Caddell mentioned about 80 of us shutting down the government, we passed appropriation bills back in July. That's what we did. And that's what we're supposed to do as the United States Congress. And in each case, they went over to Harry Reid, and he did nothing with them. Why? Because he was waiting on a day when the previous continuing resolution would expire, and at that point, he would be able to hold the entire discretionary budget hostage to Obamacare. That was his goal. And so some of us said, look, we'll be happy to fund the entire, actually not happy, reluctantly, we will fund the entire federal government with a CR, which is not the way to govern our country, but reluctantly we will do it. But we will not fund Obamacare. And we sent that to the Senate, and they stripped out the defunding, and they sent it right back to us. At which point we said, okay, given that the president has already, as Pat Caddell appropriately talked about, he's picking and choosing which parts of Obamacare to enforce. He unilaterally delayed the employer mandate without any authority from Congress against the law. But he did it. He just says, I'm not going to enforce it, and therefore he changes the law by giving a speech. And he does it over and over again. So we said if he wants to delay the employer mandate, let's delay the entire law for 1 year. By the way, we've seen testimony after testimony. Everybody knew that this rollout was going to be a train wreck. You had Jimmy Hoffa talking about how this is going to destroy the 40-hour work week that is the backbone of the American economy. We've seen people move from full-time work to part-time work. People are losing jobs. And so the president said, we're going to delay the employer mandate. We said, okay, we know how bad this is going to be on the individual side as well. Let's delay the whole law for 1 year. Boy, I'll tell you, if I was the president, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. But he didn't. Why? Because he's so ideologically committed to his domestic social agenda that at the end of the day, he's willing, as I talked about, to forego foreign policy through appropriations like the Defense Appropriation Bill in order to accomplish his agenda, which is completely inappropriate, and it's not how a republic is supposed to be governed. You're supposed to have representation in Washington, D.C. from your elected officials rather than having a president hold everything hostage to Obamacare. Pat Caddell is setting down his water. He's going to be coming up. No, I'm just kidding. He'll respond. But at the end of the day, so here's what we said. We'll delay it for 1 year. The president didn't take it. So we came back at 11 o'clock at night. We said, okay, you've delayed the employer mandate. Let's delay the individual mandate. And, of course, the Harry Reid tabled it. The president threatened to veto it. So then at midnight, the government shut down. All we were asking for is a 1 year delay of the individual mandate, which is just a $95 fine. And, by the way, it would have precluded all these headaches with the implementation with the website. That's all we were asking. One year delay of just that small provision. And Harry Reid tabled it. The president threatened to veto it. By the way, when the president delayed the employer mandate, we passed a bill. And that bill would delay the employer mandate for 1 year. And the president threatened to veto it. We try to give him what he wants. He wants to rule by decree. He doesn't have any desire to acknowledge, I'm going to throw that thing out the window. So at the end of the day, here we are. We have funded the government, but this is what's important. At 1 o'clock in the morning after the government shut down, we came back and we said we just want to have a conference. We want Republicans and Democrats to sit down and discuss this. Harry Reid tabled it. The president threatened to veto it. And that's when it dawned on me, as a freshman member of Congress on the Republican side, that the Democrats wanted this shutdown. There's no other excuse. They wanted the shutdown, and they got it. This was the Democratic shutdown, not the Republican shutdown. We were passing bills appropriately.
Got time for one quick question. One quick question. Right over there. Come on up. I'll bring the mic to you. Here we go. It's gonna be a brief one. I'm holding it. I'm gonna hold it.
16th Amendment.
What's going on? That was quick.
Okay, 16th Amendment. So I'm an advocate of the fair tax. I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with fair tax. What I run into every time, and we've got 72 co-sponsors on the fair tax. You know, Obama's IRS, which is having all kinds of egregious atrocities against conservative groups. They've got us up to 72 co-sponsors on the fair tax. Now, every time I talk about the fair tax, somebody in the room stands up and says, "No, we don't like the fair tax. We like the flat tax." And then if I talk about the flat tax, somebody says, "Oh, we don't like the flat tax. We like the fair tax." At the end of the day, our goal should be repealing the 16th Amendment, eliminating the IRS, and having 2 years to come up with a new system of collecting revenue. And that's what my Repeal 16 Amendment does.
Website.
My website is jimbridenstine.com, or you can go to in addition to that, go to repeal16.com. The goal behind Repeal 16 is to build a coalition between flat taxers and fair taxers to repeal the 16th Amendment, eliminate the IRS. But if you'd like to donate to my campaign, this is an elite group, jimbridenstine.com. Thank you so much.